Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the 5 last great European composers. How's that for a list? This is the group of composers whose music either instantly entered the canon of great classics, or whose music is in the process of or deserves to, without any question. I mean, we're not talking about, as if there's like an argument about it. They're hovering on the borders and about to plunge in. But most of them are already there. And the era of great European composers really ended, I guess, in the early 1970s. And this is the bunch, the composers who represent the last gasp of a great tradition, to be followed by the first great composers who are not European or not Central Continental European, let's put it that way. That will come later. Don't worry, we'll get there. So let's not jump the gun. But I think these are the 5 last great European composers. I really do. And there isn't anybody since who fits that category as well as these. That's the point, really. And they are, ready? Shostakovich. He was really one of the last. He lived till 1975. And, people may hem and haw about how much they like his music or not, but I think it's astonishing, just astonishing, that he could write a symphony like the 5th or the 8th or the 10th, and in the 50s or whatever he wrote them, 60s, and they immediately become part of the repertoire of music around the world. I mean, they're immediately in the symphonic repertoire, and his string quartets, immediately in the repertoire of string quartets. It's just instantaneous. And when that happens, I think in some respects you have to just stop and ask yourself, why should there even be any discussion about whether or not he's a great composer who deserves to be in the canon? He is. It's a fait accompli. And that's what actually got me thinking about this category generally, because it was such an impressive thing that all of that music consistently, good, bad, and indifferent, is constantly played, constantly recorded. Everybody does it. Audiences love it. It's an exceptional thing. I mean, he was a real genius, on a par with the greats. Next, Martinů. Martinů is taking a bit longer. Granted, he is. He's already there when it comes to chamber music, because if you see, chamber music festivals, and especially for interesting ensembles of instruments and whatnot, Martinů shows up all the time. He really does. He has 2 strikes against him. The first is that, his aesthetic, he comes from Czechoslovakia. It's a tiny country. It doesn't have the clout that Russia, the Russian tradition, or France, it never has. It's never had that kind of international clout. And second of all, he was in exile. So he spent a lot of his career in Paris and then in the United States. And although he had his proponents, Charles Munch among them, and wrote beautiful, beautiful works for American orchestras and ensembles, no place is more blasé and less interested than the United States when it comes to promoting great music and classical fora. And the American orchestras do such a bad job of promoting themselves. It's excuse me. It's absolutely ridiculous. So he's going to take a little bit longer, but he's almost there. I mean, you know from the volume of recordings and things and the attention he's been getting on disc over a sustained period of time, really multiple decades now, that he deserves to be included in that category. And his music is absolutely marvelous and incredibly distinctive. So, in terms of the quality of the finished product, I don't think there's any question. Next, Poulenc. Poulenc has always been popular, always. But now he's both popular and taken seriously, which is a different thing. He was popular because he was considered to be sort of the, smiling face of Les Six, these sort of wacky, Dadaist people who went bopping around Paris, and and occasionally he wrote some sacred music that people thought was kind of blasphemous because it was so chipper and so much fun to sing, and sort of wacky in places like the L'Aldamus Te and the Gloria, which represents nuns playing soccer and things like that. But with all that said, he's now recognized as one of the great songwriters of the 20th century, one of the great dramatists with the dialogues of the Carmelites, and Les Mamelles de Tiresias and La Voix Humaine. His chamber and orchestral works are played constantly. His piano music is exquisite. So yeah, he belongs on the list of the 5 last great European composers, as does Hindemith. I know, Hindemith's a little bit on the outs now. I understand. But he was the last great German symphonist, polyphonist, guy to do all of that stuff. He really was. And you might want to say, well, Karl Amadeus Hartmann is there too. Well, he was there too. Okay, fine. But, in terms of range of output and variety of expression and aesthetics, and, he was, I don't want to say it was as good as Bach. God forbid, I would be shot in a minute. Lightning would strike. Bang! No, I don't mean that way. But he was one of those summarizing composers. He was sort of the apotheosis of the German way of thinking about and writing music in the best sense, really in the best sense. A combination of intellectual rigor, emotional expressiveness, austerity, but boldness in certain ways. Just a awareness of tradition, but he wasn't pulled down and shackled by it. Really a brilliant, wonderful composer. He died in 1963. So far, the composer who died first in this whole group is Martinů, 1959. And I have the death dates down below. So we're at 75, 59. Poulenc was 63. Hindemith was 63. And last but not least, Stravinsky, who died in 1971, and who everybody agrees is one of the greatest composers ever, and certainly of the 20th century. He came out of that amazing Russian tradition of Tchaikovsky and Rimsky-Korsakov, and he continuously reinvented himself because he was obsessed by being in the avant-garde, at the forefront of everything that was going on. I mean, that was sort of his thing. He cared about that deeply. Some of us wish he didn't care about it that much when he got to his last period, but actually in some ways it was some of the most interesting work he did. Not because it was 12-tone or 8-tone, but because he understood, as so few composers have, that sacred music achieves its transcendental qualities because it sounds alien and inhuman and emotionally distanced. And sacred music was the perfect expression of that in his aesthetic. I mean, he always wrote music that was right for the style he was adopting. In that respect, his genius was really unlike almost anybody else out there in terms of his understanding of not just what he was doing, but what it meant and what he could do with it musically. It's topic maybe for another video at some point. But he died in 1971. And so if you have a list of the 5 last great European composers who are not these, then they have to have survived 1959. Because Martinú's the earliest date we got. So, I mean, if they died before 1959, they cannot be on the list because we've drawn the boundary at basically 1959, and they usually should have made it into the 60s. I would be very interested to see who you select, because I can think of a few names. I really can. But I think that this is that amazing musical tradition, and these were some of the last and still finest exemplars of it. And I'm awfully curious to know what you think. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.